Kenichi Kurosawa clung precariously to a tree as the water rose around him, entirely flooding the roads below. For almost 6 minutes on March 11, 2011, a 9.1 magnitude earthquake, the worst to ever hit Japan, struck 300 something kilometers, 213 miles northeast of Tokyo, triggering a hug tsunami that crashed into Isinomaki, the coastal city Kurosawa had lived in his whole life. Minutes before wave up to 10 meters, nearly 30 feet high swept in. Kurosawa, then age 14, has climbed 3 meters 10 feet up a pine tree, walked his leg around a branch and hung on for his life. I felt like the ocean was all around me. The water was so cold it chilled me to the bone. The recalls as the water came up to his knees, Kurosawa saw people in cars gripping their steering wheels as the wheelchairs were washed down the road. Others who had been hanging onto trees felled by the waves were swept any for hours. Kurosawa endured sub-zero temperatures. He thought of his wife. He reached her on her cell phone for 50 seconds while in the tree before the line went dead. As night turned to day, he heard someone in the distance calling to have help with what seemed like their last ounce of energy. He says he does not know that person's fate, but Kurosawa had just survived the deadliest natural disaster in Japan history. More than 20,000 people dead or went missing in the earthquake and subsequent tsunami, but the devastation went deeper than natural disaster. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in this part of Japan became a catastrophe of its own. Within 50 minutes of the first quake, the tsunami waves crashed a 10-meter 33 feet sea wall intended to protect the nuclear plant as the water swept in, cooling mechanisms failed, melting fuel in three reactors, and sweeping deadly radioactive particles into the surrounding areas which have since disappeared and declared to less dangerous levels this year. Ceremonies to mark the disaster's 10th anniversary will be low-key and socially distanced amid the coronavirus pandemic. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, Emperor Naruhito, and Empress Masako will attend a memorial fasting for a moment of silence at 2:46 p.m. The exact time the earthquake sparked 10 years ago. Despite the destruction wrought, many survivors have rebuilt their lives and communities, but for many the legacy of the disaster will forever remain the tsunami's power. Izunomiki, the second largest city in Miyagi Prefecture, was one of the worst hit communities by the tsunami. Waves covered almost 5 square kilometers, 500 hectares of land and inundated nearly 50% of the city, according to the International Tsunami Information Center. The tsunami destroyed more than 15,000 homes and buildings in Iswanomaki alone, obliterating a vibrant city center and most of its seaport and infrastructure. Nearly 3,100 people in the city lost their lives. Kurosawa, a plumber, was working in a neighboring town 12 kilometers (7.5 miles) from his city when the earthquake struck. He called his wife, who was sheltering in a bank, and told her to meet him at their home. Minutes later, a tsunami warning was issued. He tried calling his wife again, but the phone lines were dead. Worried for her safety, Kurosawa jumped into the car and sped home to meet her so they could head to higher ground together. Cars ticketed past him in the opposite direction, making their way to established evacuation zones. In the earthquake-prone country, as he neared his home, he stopped what looked like the tsunami barriers in the distance. When B got closer, he realized there were cars swept away by waves, moving up and down. As he made a desperate U-turn, he glimpsed a man trying to escape the incoming water on foot. I pulled him into the car through the window and I sped away from the water. But by then the tsunami was ahead of us, too, Kurosawa says. Soon sandwiched by the waves, the pair ditched the car and ran to find shelter. As Kurosawa scrambled up the tree, a branch broke and he fell onto the embankment. Kurosawa hoisted himself back up the tree. Just as the waves swept in, the man he had received did the same. I almost thought I would not make it, he says. It's hard to imagine the power of a tsunami unless you are experienced it. It's a destructive force that just swallows everything up and obliterates everything in its path. Nuclear disaster. As the tsunami swept future inland to neighboring Fukushima prefecture, the Daiichi nuclear plant was melting down. Japan declared a nuclear emergency on March 11, 2011, for what became the worst just disaster since the 1986 Chernobyl incident. More than 300,000 people living near the Daiichi nuclear plant were forced to temporarily evacuate according to the Red Cross. Another 15,000 people moved out of the irradiated areas voluntarily. In the following months and years, parts of the area around Fukushima became ghost towns, visited only by Tokyo Electric Power Company (TEPCO) officials, safety inspectors, and tourists seeing a dark trail sign the disaster. TEPCO has been pumping hundreds of tons of water into the nuclear plant to cool the reactors and stop the outflow of radiation. The cleanup from the disaster is expecting to take decades and cost billions of dollars. More than 335,000 people remain displaced 10 years after the original meltdown, according to the Fukushima authorities. Hajime Masukubo, a spokesperson from the Citizens Nuclear Information Center in Tokyo, an anti-nuclear public interest organization, says the region hit by the earthquake and tsunami have mostly recovered. However, the recovery work around the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant has remained at a standstill since the meltdown, yet despite the large amount of money spent, the population around the area has halved since 2010. After 10 years, what we have realized is that once a nuclear accident occurs, the cleanup is tremendously difficult, he said. Currently, TEPCO is storing over a million metric tons of water used to cool the reactors in hug tanks to at the plant, but storage space is fast running out and authorities, including the country's environment minister, have considered the only solution is to release it into the ocean. The plant facing opposition from environmental campaigners and fishing industry representatives. In 2014, the Japanese government began lifting evacuation orders for zones with annual doses of radiation below 20 millisieverts, the maximum explosive recommended by international safety watchdogs, and the equivalent to full body CT scans. As of March 2020, only 2.4% of the prefecture remains off limits of residence, with even parts of the area accessible for short visits, according to Japanese Ministry of Environment. However, despite the decontamination effort, a 2020 survey conducted by Kwanzi Gakuin University found 65% of Evanses no longer wanted to return to Fukushima Prefecture. 46% said they feared residual contamination of the environment, and 45% said they had settled elsewhere. Fukushima also shocked Japanese long-stated commitment to nuclear power. Period of the disaster, the country has 15 or so reactors provided more than 13% of its power, according to the World Nuclear Association, an industry body. This ended on May 5, 2012, when the country's last operating reactor in Hokkaido shut down for inspection, leaving Japan without nuclear power for the first time in more than 45 years. Two units of the Oi nuclear power plant were briefly restarted in 2012 but went offline again a year later. Following the nuclear meltdown, countries such as Germany vowed to shuttle a nuclear reactor by 2022, but 10 years later, experts in Japan are divided on the use of the technology, which is better for the environment than burying fossil fuels will the public's anti-nuclear stance has slowly wanted. In August 2015, a reactor was started in Sendai in Kagoshima Prefecture on the southern island of Kyushu. Passage of time. On the morning of March 12, Kurosawa climbed out of the pine tree. It looked like a boom and wrecked his city. As he made his way home, he wandered through the neighborhoods, doing parts of brick, both that have waste elsewhere. Half collapsed buildings were submerged in water, and he slept to bread to smoke laid her. Kurosawa's wife was alive, having been evacuated to a school on higher ground, but overnight they lost the friends and physical markets that made up their lives. For the next 6 months, Kurosawa and his wife lived in Higan's home and their friends' offices. In August 2011, they moved into temporary disaster housing, a prefabricated building they called home for over their 3 years. Kurosawa put his plumbing skills to use, volunteering to help his local community with odd jobs. He still lives in Ishinomaki. I went from having a normal routine to have an abnormal one that became the new norm. 1 year, 2 year passed, the abnormal reality returned to normal, says Kurosawa. For 5 years, he had dreams at night of walking through the wreckage of his hometown. Today is Ishinomaki. Kurosawa says people's feeling toward nuclear power is the region remain just as mixed as each person's experience of the 10th anniversary of the disaster. People ask me how I feel now. It's been 10 years. I still feel like I'm living on that extended timeline and trying my best, he says. Over the years, Kurosawa has fought to rebuild his life, business, and community. Today, coastal embankments close to 10 meters, 33 feet in height, extend for about 56 kilometers, 34 miles, along the coast to protect his city from the ocean. New public residents have sprung up on the city's outskirts, while others are still being rebuilt. Kurosawa says people's emotion scars take just as much time to heal as the built environment, but he says there is no point living in the past. Today, Kurosawa plays as active role in teaching others about disaster preparedness and keeps moving forward. One thing I learned from this disaster is that people need to live among each other. I think the hope lies in US, he says.